I'm delighted that you have a show because you're fresh, you're funny, you're great. And I want you to know something. From my heart, I never liked you.
Don Rickles had many rivals in show business, but when it came down to pure animosity, there was one man he claimed to dislike more than anyone else. For Rickles, whose entire career was built on the art of poking fun, joking at the expense of others, and tearing down walls with laughter, hatred wasn't a common theme. He was loved, even admired, for roasting everyone equally. But this one relationship would go down in history as one of the most contentious of his life. To understand why, though, you need to understand Don Rickles himself, the sharp-tongued, quick-witted New Yorker who went from a kid in Queens to one of the most legendary comedians of the 20th century. Born Donald J. Rickles on May 8, 1926, in Queens, New York, Rickles grew up in the working-class neighborhood of Jackson Heights. It was a world where neighbors leaned on one another, where kids played stickball in the streets, and where everyone knew your name. He was raised in a Jewish household that valued humor and resilience in equal measure. His father, Max Rickles, was a hard-working insurance agent, while his mother, Etta, stayed at home and poured all her energy into raising her son. She saw something in Don from the beginning, an unusual spark, a knack for making people laugh with just a look or a quick remark. His sharp wit was evident even as a child, and she nurtured it with pride, convinced her boy was destined for something beyond the ordinary. In school, Rickles was quick to entertain classmates with his rapid-fire comebacks. Teachers often found themselves both exasperated and amused by his ability to turn any situation into a joke. Yet, beneath the humor was a young man with serious aspirations. After graduating from high school, Rickles pursued his dream of becoming an actor, enrolling in the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York City. At the time, he had no intention of becoming a comedian. His sights were set on drama, Broadway plays, perhaps even Hollywood films. He wanted to deliver serious monologues to be remembered as a great dramatic actor. But, as fate would have it, the path he thought he wanted wasn't the path life had carved out for him. While he worked tirelessly on his craft, Rickles began to notice something. Audiences were more taken with his quick remarks between lines than with the lines themselves. Whenever he cracked a joke or delivered a sarcastic aside, people laughed louder and longer than they did at his carefully rehearsed dramatic scenes. It was as if his natural humor couldn't be contained, no matter how hard he tried to suppress it. Slowly, almost reluctantly, he began to embrace what others already saw in him. His true gift was comedy. But before Rickles could fully dive into the world of entertainment, history came calling. Like countless other young men of his generation, he joined the U.S. military during World War II. Rickles served as a seaman aboard the USS Siren in the Pacific Theater, experiencing firsthand the hardships and uncertainty of war. The experience toughened him, but it also broadened his perspective. Surrounded by fellow sailors, Rickles often used humor to lighten the heavy atmosphere. His quick tongue and knack for cutting through tension with a perfectly timed jab made him popular among the crew. It was a glimpse of the man he was destined to become, though he himself may not have realized it yet. When the war ended, Rickles returned home with a renewed sense of purpose, but also with the same struggles many veterans faced. The transition to civilian life wasn't easy. Work was scarce, and his dream of becoming a serious actor seemed further away than ever. He took on odd jobs, auditioned for parts, and tried to make ends meet while pursuing his ambitions. By the early 1950s, he found himself drawn to nightclubs where he performed short sets in between acting gigs. At first, comedy was filler, something he did to keep the audience engaged while waiting for the real performance. But over time, he realized something undeniable. People weren't coming to see him act. They were coming to laugh. It was a turning point. Instead of resisting, Rickles leaned into his natural instincts. He began crafting a style that set him apart from every other comedian of his era. Unlike the performers who relied on neatly structured, jokes or carefully polished anecdotes, Rickles did something radical. He went after the audience itself. He'd step on stage, scan the room, and within seconds he was tearing into people, tossing out biting one-liners about their appearance, their jobs, or their mannerisms. No one was safe, not even the celebrities who sat in his crowd. His comedy wasn't about telling jokes. It was about creating a shared moment of chaos where everyone was in on the act, even if they were the target of it. What made it work, what made Rickles beloved instead of despised, was his delivery. There was no malice behind his words, only mischief. He had a way of making insults feel affectionate, of turning mockery into a strange kind of flattery. It was a delicate balance, but Rickles mastered it. That's how he earned the nickname, Mr. Warmth. It was a title steeped in irony, yet it perfectly captured his gift. He could skewer you with a joke and somehow leave you grateful for the experience. One of the most pivotal moments in Rickles' career came in the early 1960s during a show in Miami. Frank Sinatra, arguably the most powerful entertainer in the world at the time, happened to be in the audience. Sinatra's reputation was intimidating. He wasn't just a singer and actor. He was a cultural icon with connections that stretched into every corner of the entertainment industry. Most performers treated him with a reverence bordering on fear. But not Rickles. The moment he spotted Sinatra in the crowd, he did the unthinkable. He went after him. "Make yourself at home, Frank," Rickles quipped from the stage. "Hit somebody." The room froze. Everyone knew Sinatra's reputation, and insulting him, even in jest, was considered career suicide. But to everyone's shock, Sinatra burst out laughing. He loved it. He loved the audacity, the sheer nerve it took to poke fun at someone like him. In that moment, Sinatra became Rickles' biggest champion. Not only did he continue to attend Rickles' shows, but he also introduced him to his circle of friends, opening doors that would have otherwise remained firmly shut. Their unlikely friendship cemented Rickles' place in the Hollywood elite. More importantly, it proved that his brand of comedy, bold and fearless as it was, had universal appeal. If he could roast Sinatra and come out not just unscathed but celebrated, then there was no one he couldn't touch. His courage, his confidence, and his razor-sharp wit made him irresistible. But just as Rickles made friends through his comedy, he also made enemies. His unapologetic style meant that some people didn't take kindly to being the butt of the joke. For every star who adored him, there was another who bristled under his humor. And in the case of the man he hated most, the tension wasn't just for show. It was very real. Rickles' disdain ran deep, and the feeling was mutual. That feud would follow him for years, shaping part of his reputation in ways both humorous and bitter. As Rickles' career gained momentum, he began appearing regularly on television. Shows like The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson gave him a platform to showcase his improvisational genius to millions of viewers. Audiences loved his unpredictability. One moment he'd be charming and disarming, the next he'd be verbally dismantling a celebrity guest sitting beside him. Carson himself adored Rickles, often inviting him back just to see what chaos he would cause. Rickles also found success on the big screen, though acting never fully replaced comedy as his true passion. He appeared in films like Run Silent, Run, deep alongside Clark Gable and Burt Lancaster, proving he could. But even in Hollywood, his reputation as the king of insult comedy preceded him. Directors and actors alike knew that if Rickles was on set, there would be as much laughter off camera as on. By the 1970s and 1980s, Rickles had become a household name. His style of comedy influenced countless performers who came after him, paving the way for a new era of bold, boundary-pushing humor. Yet through it all, Rickles never strayed far from the roots that made him unique. He wasn't a joke-teller in the traditional sense. He was a master of moments, someone who could walk into a room and instantly turn it into a stage. His personal life was equally remarkable. In 1965, he married Barbara Sklar, the love of his life. Their marriage lasted over 50 years. a rarity. In Hollywood, and by all accounts was filled with genuine love and devotion. Together they raised 2 children, Larry and Mindy, and Rickles often credited his family with keeping him grounded amid the chaos of show business. Yet, no matter how beloved he was, Rickles never stopped speaking his mind. He was fearless in his comedy, unafraid to offend, unafraid to push boundaries. That fearlessness won him legions of fans, but it also guaranteed that some people would remain on the receiving end of his animosity. And when he claimed to hate someone, it carried weight, because Don Rickles didn't mince words on stage or off. Even late in his career, Rickles never lost his edge. Younger generations discovered him through his voice work as Mr. Potato Head in Pixar's Toy Story films, while longtime fans continued to flock to his live performances. Age did nothing to dull his wit. If anything, it made him sharper, more willing to say the things others wouldn't dare. By the time he passed away in 2017 at the age of 90, Don Rickles had secured his place as a true legend. His legacy wasn't just in the jokes he told or the celebrities he roasted. It was in the way he transformed comedy itself. He showed that humor could be biting yet affectionate, cruel yet kind, daring yet endearing. He proved that insults, when delivered with heart, could bring people together instead of tearing them apart. But ask those who knew him best, and they'd tell you, for all the laughter, for all the charm, there was still one man Rickles never forgave, one person he claimed to truly hate above all others. And in a career built on laughter, that bitterness remains one of the most fascinating footnotes in the story of Mr. Warmth. That bitterness, however, wasn't the full story. For as much as Don Rickles could hold a grudge, he could just as easily disarm people with the very same humor that caused friction in the first place. It was his strange paradox. He could appear ruthless on stage, but once the lights dimmed, those who knew him personally described him as warm, loyal, and surprisingly sensitive. It's one of the reasons why his supposed hatred carried such weight. If Rickles said he truly didn't like someone, fans and colleagues took it seriously, because Rickles wasn't in the habit of putting on an act once he left the microphone behind. Part of what fueled these rare animosities was Rickles's belief in honesty. He valued sincerity over pretension. Hollywood, of course, is built on pretension, which meant Rickles often clashed with those who took themselves too seriously. He couldn't stand people who demanded reverence or carried themselves as though they were untouchable. His comedy cut through that facade like a hot knife through butter, and for some, it stung in ways they couldn't forgive. Rickles believed that humor should humble people, even the most powerful. If you couldn't laugh at yourself, in his eyes, you didn't deserve the pedestal you stood on. This philosophy was at the heart of why he adored Sinatra. For all of Sinatra's fame, power, and influence, he laughed when Rickles poked fun at him. That laughter turned what could have been a disaster into one of the greatest friendships of Rickles' life. But not everyone had Sinatra's thick skin. Some celebrities left Rickles' shows fuming, unable to separate the joke from the man. It was those people, those who took offense, those who held on to the sting, that Rickles never forgot. As the years rolled on, Rickles continued to balance his sharp-tongued stage persona with his private devotion to family and friends. He and Barbara remained inseparable, and their marriage became a testament to the idea that love could endure, even in the unpredictable world of show business. At home, Rickles wasn't the loudmouth comic audiences expected. He was affectionate, attentive, and, in many ways, the exact opposite of Mr. Warmth. His children often described him as deeply caring, albeit still armed with that same humor that defined his public life. In his later years, Rickles began to reflect more openly on his career. He appeared in interviews, documentaries, and tributes, often sharing stories about the people he had roasted, the friendships he had forged, and the risks he had taken. Time and again, he returned to that night in Miami with Sinatra, calling it the turning point of his entire career. He knew that without Sinatra's laughter, he might have faded into obscurity, just another struggling actor who never quite found his niche. Instead, Sinatra, for all his ability to turn insults into affection, there were some relationships he simply couldn't repair. And in that sense, Rickles was as human as anyone else, flawed, passionate, and deeply authentic. Looking back, it becomes clear that his story wasn't just about comedy. It was about courage. It took courage to stand on stage and insult the most powerful man in the room. It took courage to carve out an entirely new genre of humor when no one else dared. And it took courage to be unapologetically himself in a world that constantly asked people to play a part. Don Rickles never played a part. He was always himself, sharp, funny, fearless, and real. And maybe that's why his comedy endures, even now. Because behind every insult was truth, and behind every laugh was the reminder that none of us, no matter how important we think we are, should ever take ourselves too seriously. That, in the end, was the true gift of Don Rickles. He could make you laugh at yourself, even when it hurt. He could humble you with a joke, then win you back with a wink. He could carry grudges, yes, but he also carried love for his family, respect for his friends, and loyalty for those who stood by him. For all the talk of hatred, what really defined Don Rickles' life was love. The love of laughter, the love of people, and the love of the stage that made him a legend.